Most people fear old age not because the body weakens, but because they believe something essential disappears with it: purpose, meaning, identity. The real fear is not wrinkles or slowing down, it is the fear of becoming invisible, irrelevant, unfinished. From a young age, modern culture trains us to chase youth, productivity, and validation. We are taught how to perform, how to succeed, how to remain useful. Yet we are rarely taught how to grow old with depth and dignity. Aging is framed as decline. Slowness is treated as failure. Stillness is something to be avoided. Carl Jung believed this was a tragic misunderstanding of human life. According to Jung, the second half of life is not a weaker continuation of the first, it is an entirely different psychological journey. The first half is about building a place in the world. The second half is about discovering who you are without the world's applause. One movement turns outward, the other turns inward. Jung did not view aging as loss. He saw it as transformation, a turning inward, a movement toward wholeness. Within his work lie four essential psychological pillars that determine whether old age becomes a time of fear and bitterness or the most meaningful phase of life. These pillars are not comforting illusions or simple self-help techniques. They are demanding, sometimes unsettling truths about the human psyche. The fourth pillar, in particular, is rarely discussed openly. Jung considered it essential, yet deeply misunderstood. Without it, the other three remain incomplete. Stay with this until the end, because without this final insight, true peace in the later years of life remains out of reach. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to the Deep Psyche channel if you are drawn to psychology that goes beneath surface motivation and explores the deeper structure of the human soul. Now, let us begin. Pillar 1, Individuation, the shift from outer authority to inner truth. In the first half of life, identity is built through adaptation. We learn how to belong, how to meet expectations, and how to survive within family, culture, and society. Jung called this adaptive identity the persona, a psychological mask that allows us to function in the world. Without it, life would be chaotic. The persona is not false, it is necessary. Problems arise when the persona hardens, when a person becomes identical with the role they once needed to survive. Many people reach midlife or old age still living inside identities formed decades earlier: the responsible provider, the obedient child, the achiever, the respectable figure. Roles that once provided stability now feel empty and restrictive. This discomfort is not failure. It is a signal. The psyche is asking for a new orientation. Jung called this process individuation, the gradual transfer of authority from the outer world to the inner one. It is the realization that meaning cannot be borrowed indefinitely from roles, institutions, or the approval of others. At a certain point in life, the psyche demands a more authentic source of direction. This transition is rarely comfortable. Old certainties begin to weaken, and goals that once felt vital lose their emotional charge. A person may feel disoriented, restless, or quietly depressed. Jung did not interpret this as pathology or failure. He saw it as psychological maturation, evidence that something essential is trying to emerge. Individuation does not mean withdrawing from life or isolating oneself from others. It means alignment. In later life, this inner authority becomes crucial. Without it, aging feels like subtraction. With it, aging becomes refinement. What remains is not less, but truer. Pillar 2, Integrating the shadow, the courage to face oneself without illusion. If individuation is the destination, the shadow is the terrain that must be crossed. The shadow contains everything we rejected in order to be accepted: traits we judged unacceptable, emotions we suppressed, desires we feared, and potentials we never dared to live. These aspects do not disappear, they accumulate beneath the surface. In younger years, the pressures of survival keep the shadow at bay. But as external demands fade, the shadow begins to speak. It often emerges as regret, bitterness, cynicism, or a quiet sadness with no obvious cause. Many interpret this as decline. Jung understood it as an invitation. He believed moral development does not mean becoming more good, it means becoming whole. Shadow integration requires honesty without self-deception, recognizing aggression without acting it out, acknowledging envy without shame, and accepting vulnerability without collapse. This process is uncomfortable because it dismantles the carefully constructed image we hold of ourselves. Yet it is also deeply liberating. When the shadow is acknowledged, it loses its destructive power. What once erupted unconsciously can now be held consciously in later life. This integration produces a psychological softening. Judgment gives way to understanding. Rigidity gives way to flexibility. Reactivity gives way to calm presence, not because life was easy, but because the person stopped lying to themselves. Pillar 3, Meaning after achievement, from doing to being. One of the deepest crises of aging arises from a cultural misunderstanding of meaning. Modern society equates value with productivity. When productivity slows, identity collapses. Jung considered this a profound psychological error. The second half of life demands a different kind of meaning, one rooted not in doing, but in being. As time shortens, attention naturally turns inward. This is not regression, it is transformation. The future no longer stretches endlessly ahead, and because of this, the present moment deepens. In the later stages of life, experiences are no longer measured by usefulness, but by resonance. Memory, imagination, and symbolism take on greater importance. Life begins to feel coherent rather than fragmented. Events once judged as failures or mistakes reveal themselves as necessary movements within a larger story. Meaning now arises from seeing one's life as a whole, not as a list of achievements, but as a lived psychological journey. This perspective brings a quiet fulfillment, one that does not depend on recognition or applause. Yet even this sense of meaning remains incomplete without facing the final psychological task. Pillar 4, Reconciling with Death, the final act of psychological maturity. Modern culture treats death as a problem to be postponed. Jung treated it as a psychological reality to be understood. He believed the psyche prepares for death just as it prepares for life, through dreams, symbols, and subtle shifts in awareness. When this process is resisted, fear dominates. When it is accepted, calm begins to emerge. Jung did not claim to know what happens after death. What mattered was the attitude toward it. A life lived in denial of mortality becomes shallow, driven by distraction and avoidance. A life lived with awareness of mortality becomes sincere, focused, and meaningful. To make peace with death is not to desire it, it is to give it a rightful place within one's understanding of existence. When death is acknowledged, priorities clarify and petty concerns fall away. What remains is what truly matters: connection, truth, integrity, and presence. In this sense, death is not the enemy of life, but its silent partner. It gives depth to our choices and gravity to our values. This final pillar cannot be taught as a technique. It emerges slowly through reflection, loss, and courage. But when it does, old age no longer feels like decline. It feels like completion. For Jung, a fulfilled old age is not achieved by clinging to youth, but by completing the inward journey: individuation, shadow integration, meaning beyond achievement, and reconciliation with mortality. In this light, aging is not the end of life. It is the final act of becoming whole. If this reflection resonated with you, subscribe to Truth to Mastery for psychology that goes beyond surface motivation and into the deeper architecture of the human psyche. This channel is for those who seek understanding, not shortcuts, and mastery that begins within. And if this video helped you see aging, meaning, or your own life differently, like it and share it with someone who may be quietly searching for the same clarity. Because the second half of life was never meant to be empty. It was meant to be conscious. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.